Welcome back, the JT Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. Rhino over in the booth, Dave Hughes here, and on the phone with us now, the Secretary of State of the great state of Mississippi, Michael Watson. Join us. Are we on live on Facebook? Yes, we are also on Facebook Live if you want to catch us there. Michael, how you doing today, sir?
I am well, alive and well, and we're up and running and serving the good people of Mississippi. So everybody's good over here, keeping social distance at a maximum. So we're taking care of the governor's request and making sure that we again serve Mississippians as best we can under the current circumstances.
Well, Michael, I have mixed feelings about talking to you because on the one hand, I'm very excited to get to talk to somebody about something other than the COVID-19 outbreak. But on the other hand, does it have to be this? They're opening the Bonnet Carré again.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are dealing with that again. I heard somebody say the other day it's like a 1-2 punch. You've got the COVID response, and then, by the way, let's pour a little salt in the open wound from years past, and let's open up the Bonnet Carré. So it's been a tough road for us the last week. They opened it up on Friday, as you know, and I had a call on Thursday with them, and it's basically just a window dressing, what they call their stakeholders phone call. They're going to have a meeting in New Orleans and then one in Vicksburg, but obviously we could not do that because of the COVID and social distancing, so they did a Zoom meeting, and we were able to ask a question. And again, they called it a stakeholders meeting to take into account people's concerns, but it was nothing more than window dressing. That decision had been made, and unfortunately, it's open again.
Well, and let me ask you this, because I suspect you're a better man than I am. Did you raise your voice during the Zoom meeting? Because I probably would have gotten loud at this point.
Well, we had to type in our comments, so I typed in all caps.
There we go. Yeah, okay, that counts. That counts. I feel better. It's not just me.
I'm kidding. I didn't do all caps.
Yeah, you should have. Next time you ought to do that, Michael. Now, of course, we already have a lawsuit against the Army Corps of Engineers for what happened last year when they opened the Bonnet Carré.
We do, and Mississippians should know we actually have two. One, obviously, for the flooding in the 16th section lands of southwest Mississippi, and then the second one for the opening of the Bonnet Carré, and just the devastating impact that's had on coastal Mississippi. And, the coast has a huge impact on the economy as a state as a whole. When you're talking about your seafood and your oysters and the things that we love from the coast that we eat across this state, devastated those industries, and obviously the whole coast took a big hit. Tourism, seafood, you name it, and water quality. Folks that get out there and want to access and enjoy the water. We saw dolphins, we saw turtles, we saw you name it, injured from the unprecedented flow of water coming in from the Bonnet Carré. And it's something that the Corps, in a sense, refuses to address. And obviously, on my question on the meeting the other day, they prefaced it with, well, we're in litigation, so we really can't answer that question. But here's our sidestep. So it's unfortunate, but we're pressing the pedal and trying to move as fast as we can to get some relief.
Well, and that's the thing people have to remember, and you mentioned it in the middle of that. It's not just the seafood. I know I saw one stat, I think it was 90% of the oyster harvest was wiped out last year when all that fresh water was released from the Bonnet Carré into the Gulf. But then we had the algae bloom, which closed down a lot of the beaches and cut out on the tourism. So it affects just about every aspect of the coast economy when they do this.
It does, and technically the waters, people were not supposed to go into the waters, but they could actually access the beach. But once you say, the waters are closed, and who wants to go to the beach and not be able to access the water? So it was a big hit to the coast economy, and obviously, again, the economy from the coast impacts the entire state. So it's a big deal to all of us in Mississippi, and something we all should be paying attention to. And again, they tried to talk about this in the meeting the other day about, we're only going to open up a third of the gates, roughly, and it's about 120 to 130,000 cubic feet per second that will be flowing for roughly a month. And then they compared it to last year, and in the first opening last year, from February to April, they opened up 206 of their bays, and it was 213,000 cubic feet per second. And then the second opening, from May to July 27th, 168 of their bays, and so a little bit less of a flow. But again, we've already gotten that hit, and to continue to get that piled on what we had last year is just another devastating hit to us.
Well, we have a question on the C Spire text line, which I think is a good question. When you were on that Zoom meeting call, which, as you said, was basically for show. It was a PR move on their part to say, yes, we talked to all the stakeholders, and then we did what we were going to do anyway. But the question from Daryl in Hattiesburg, did they give a reason for not opening the Morganza?
No. What they say, and they say it every time, is, well, we're constrained by a congressional mandate and how this operates. And so my question was, to that point, okay, you say that you're constrained and you can't open this because of congressional mandate. Have you even approached Congress to ask them for the ability to change your operations? And again, they would not answer it because obviously that puts the burden on them, and they don't want to admit whether or not they've tried. So it would be helpful to us, obviously, and that's one of the things we asked for in our lawsuit, was for them to implement, hey, open the Morganza and at least just let off some of the strain on the Bonnet Carré and in the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf around, obviously, our waters here in Mississippi. So that's a great question and one that we tried to ask, but they would not answer.
Well, and maybe I'm getting the wrong feeling from this, but it was the same way last year, Michael. I just get the feeling that the Corps of Engineers places more importance on Louisiana than they do Mississippi.
You know, that's a sense some of us kind of get, and it's interesting. You know, I asked Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, hey, did they give you a heads up that this was coming? I asked our MEMA director, did they give you a heads up this was coming? No one knew. We found out about this from an email from a third party out of Louisiana. And interestingly enough, I was talking to Louisiana Secretary of State, Carla Dwan, the other day, and I said, man, quit putting all this water on us. He said, what are you talking about? So he didn't know either. So they just kind of operate on their own, and we've asked, hey, look, we want a seat at the table so we can talk. And so that's when they throw out, well, we had this stakeholders meeting. Yeah, right. We had no opportunity whatsoever to have any say-so on the direction it's going.
Well, like you were saying, and like I just said, it just seems to me like they did this just to say they did it, and they never planned to take anything else into account before they did what they had already decided to do, which is, to me, a part of the problem of what happened last year. But if this is going to turn into a regular thing every year, it will basically do away with the Mississippi Gulf Coast as we know it.
Look, this is the first time in the project's 89-year history, that it's been open 3 years in a row. So you're right; it's a more frequent occurrence now. It's something that we're going to have to change, and I believe, and one of the answers they keep telling me is, well, we're working with the federal delegation to get some money for another study. Man, that answer has been coming out for the last 15, 20 years. So it's time to do something. We've got to have a seat at the table, and we've got to have some action quickly.
Well, I guess my question is, what do we have to do a study for? We have the results of what's happened to us the last 2 years. We know what the results are when you open this thing. Why can't we react to that data in the Corps of Engineers?
That's common sense. And in their terms, obviously, they want an environmental impact study, and that's what we've also asked for. But we've already seen firsthand what that environmental impact study looks like. So, yeah, they want the numbers and the science, and I understand that. But if you can't see there's been an impact, then something's wrong with you. So we're continuing on with our lawsuit. They actually filed a motion to dismiss that, and so that's what's on the table right now that we're going to combat and moving forward with it. So we're trying our best, and we'll continue that fight as we move forward.
I just want to clarify that, Michael. Did you just say they have filed a motion to dismiss our lawsuit? Did you just say that?
That is a true story. Yes, sir.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so it's a fight, and it's one worth having here in Mississippi, and one that we're honored to fight for the people in Mississippi and get some change.
And do you have any idea when you're going to hear? Is the pandemic outbreak, the COVID-19, is that slowing down some of the progress of the lawsuits as far as moving forward and seeing what the next steps are?
It slowed it a bit. We actually met with some experts, and that was one of the first things we had to do was identify our experts. And our legal team was out there meeting with them about a month ago now, and then the motion to dismiss was filed. So we are obviously strategizing and moving forward together with that. And yes, it has slowed down because obviously the courts have put a little brakes on their service, and then getting to meet with people and getting our information together has been a little bit tough as well. But we've already done a lot of homework, and a big kudos to Secretary Hoseman and the work that his team did getting this prepared and setting the groundwork for it. So we're stepping up to the plate now and going to take our swings as well.
Well, it's a fantastic job, and I've got something on the C Spire text line I want to read you on this subject. It says, thank you, Michael, for the great work you're doing. We did not catch any shrimp last year. Many in my family depend on shrimp to make a living in the summer and fall months. That's Casey in Ocean Springs. That's exactly the kind of impact we're talking about that we've got to do something about.
It is, and it's a unique position for me to be in, being from the coast and understanding the way of life that we live and that I grew up around. And so it makes it that much more important to me. Not that it would be any more important than anything from Tupelo or North Mississippi. Obviously, I spent 7 years in North Mississippi in college, so very near and dear to my heart as well. But having that unique sense of growing up around it and making it that much more important and understanding that impact directly makes me want to, look, we've got to succeed. We've got to prove good for Mississippi.
Michael, can you hold on through the break for a minute? You did it well. Welcome back to the JT Show. Dave Hughes here on the phone with us and on Facebook Live as well. Your Secretary of State in Mississippi, Michael Watson. Michael, the Bonnet Carré Spillway aside, and when I saw that notice last Friday, I just sat there and muttered to myself for like 30 seconds, but this is what we need. That's perfect. But we still have the COVID-19 outbreak going on. And I know you guys at the Secretary of State's office and most of us are observing the social distancing and everything else. From a legal standpoint, we've heard a lot of fussing, I guess is the word that I'm looking for here, from some churches. Now, most of them that I see in Mississippi are following along with these guidelines, but right next door in Louisiana, we've had some churches that have kind of bucked the trend. Can you speak to the legality of enforcing some of these orders on churches?
Yeah, and Dave, we see eye to eye on this. The piece of this that people seem to be overlooking is the personal responsibility piece of it. And I appreciate I've had numerous pastors reach out and ask questions about, look, what do we do? How do we have our church services, but also comply with the orders? Matter of fact, I was on a call yesterday with a bunch of churches from around the state, and so the enforcement piece is a great question. And for Mississippians, obviously, your local law enforcement officers, your police officers, the highway patrol, everybody has the ability to enforce these executive orders that are coming down from the governor's office. But the key piece is, again, the personal responsibility. And I've seen such an incredible response by our churches. I was talking to my buddy Adrian the other day. He's a pastor in Philadelphia, and he said, look, we're just having church out in the parking lot, and folks drive up in their cars, they sit in their cars, and we've set up our PA system and our praise and worship team. And the folks that are reaching out online and having online services, I think more folks are probably hearing the gospel now through this, which is one of the cool things. You look at the silver linings, and the Lord always works out things to his good. More folks are probably hearing the gospel on Facebook and on the internet now than ever before. And so one of the great things that you take out of this, we Carla Thornhill, one of my great employees here, she's our deputy chief of staff, she said, I saw something the other day talking about how not every day is good, but every day has good things that happen, so find the good in every day. And the same thing we have to do here, to be uplifting to each other and find the good out of this, and that's one of the good things that we can think of. So, but your interesting question there, the enforcement piece, and again, it's local law enforcement officers and state patrol, and God bless our men and women in uniform, and especially those on the front line in this disaster. So praying for those guys daily as well.
Yeah, and you don't want to, as a law enforcement officer, you don't want to be in the position where you have to go shut down church. So, you're hopeful that the churches will understand this, and it looks to me like the majority of them are. A buddy of mine down in Pike County, Dale Coon, was telling me that his church, Bela Chitta Baptist Church, had ordered and are getting in this week an FM transmitter. So they're actually going to have everybody pull up in the parking lot, keep their windows rolled up, the car running, the air conditioner running, and they're going to have church, and they're all going to tune to the same frequency and get to hear it.
That's awesome. I've heard that from a few churches, matter of fact. And it's so cool. Again, the corporate worship's important to our church body, and seeing your friends that you go to church with and those smiles in the car next to you, it's a little bit different than sitting on the same pew. But again, just knowing that we're all in this thing together, and Mississippians are resilient and obviously God-fearing people. And so I appreciate the efforts that our pastors and our churches are undertaking to make sure that the gospel is heard no matter what. And it's an important piece of our faith and our fabric here in Mississippi.
And that's the thing to remember, not only just for churches, but across the board. Local law enforcement does have the ability to enforce these executive orders. And we have a lot of people talking about, constitutional rights and various things like that. And to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're missing the whole state of emergency part of this.
They are. And again, my hope would be that the government never had to even mention any kind of executive order to shelter in place. We should have the ability and the train of thought to say, you know what, it's smart for me to protect my family. I'm going to limit my movement. I'm going to limit each and every thing that I can do to make sure that I don't access or show make my family susceptible to this disease. And sometimes, obviously, folks take that for granted, and the government has to step in. And so I think it's been a fine line between personal responsibility and government overreach. Where is that line, and how do you delicately balance that? So we have this executive order, and you're right. The important piece is, again, go back to that personal responsibility. Just do the right thing, and don't put our men and women in uniform in a bad spot where they have to enforce something just because you don't think it applies to you, and you're bulletproof, and nothing's going to happen to you. So be wise, be smart, be kind to our men and women in uniform, and if they ask you to move along in your boat or move along in your vehicle, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and make sure that we're protecting them as well.
Exactly. And I have one more question for you from the C Spire text line, 10 from Tupelo. And this comes back again to the legal ramifications of these orders and some of the gray areas where it might not be as well defined in some people's minds. Tim says, I just did some work at a business yesterday. And, of course, this is all alleged. We have just Tim's side of the story here. But said, I just did some work at a business yesterday that knew an employee tested positive for it at the time I was doing the work, and I was not informed. They closed down for cleaning after I left and just found out about the closing and the reason why today on Facebook. And then he says he's trying to find a thermometer so he can monitor his temperature for 14 days. Are we going to see some cases where there's some legal responsibility that's going to come back on some folks because of this kind of thing?
I fear we're going to see a huge influx of lawsuits. And I tell you, some of them, for instance, the other day I was talking to my niece, and she was aware of a young man that had gone to a gas station to eat for lunch, and one of the attendants at the gas station that was preparing food or whatever had gone out and been tested because they were showing some of the signs, and came back to work. And comes out, this guy gets infected with COVID, the guy that went to eat at the gas station. So I'm not sure if that's where he was infected or not, but you got to be smart. And so if business owners are aware of their employees who have it and could expose other people to it, I think that's probably going to raise some questions and maybe even some lawsuits. So, again, it goes back to personal responsibility. Make the right decision. Be wise about your decisions, including your employees and your family members. So, and one of the things I want to echo that I've heard from hospitals around the state, especially down in Jackson County, the last vast number of cases they've seen come through has been family-to-family interaction. So we think our families are safe. We can go over to my grandmother's house or my uncle's house or my aunt's house, and no, please don't. There's a reason why the governor's asked folks to shelter in place and ordered folks to shelter in place. And again, that personal responsibility piece. But what they've seen on the coast is a big influx of cases from family member to family member. So just because it's your family doesn't mean that it's safe to go visit them. So please be smart with that.
Well, and, we all got the notification in the family. My mama locked her house down like Fort Knox about 3 weeks ago. You couldn't get in there. I don't care what your reason was. She said, if you want to pull up in the driveway, I'll wave at you through the window, and that's as close as I'm getting. But that's the kind of thing we have to do. It's not easy. It's hard. But that's the kind of thing we have to do to get through this with as little damage and death as possible. So I think you're giving very good advice. That's
exactly right. And it's so tough. My wife and I and our three little girls, she just says, look, I just want to go see Mama and Papa. And I said, well, you can go see them, but you're going to have to stand out in the yard 100 feet or so from them. So it's just who we are. It's family. It's Mississippi, and that's part of our fabric. So it's tough, but we've got to be smart. We've got to make wise decisions and protect as many people as we can from exposure.
Michael, the only other question that I have for you is, Just roughly, rough estimate. When's the last time you washed your hands?
I am looking right now on a bottle of hand sanitizer.
Okay.
And I use it probably about every 5 minutes, every time I think about it.
As long as it's measured in minutes, I think that's fine. When you ask somebody and they say it's been a couple of hours, I just kind of start easing away from them now.
My dad told me the other day he had washed the skin off his hands.
Well, if nothing else, from the wrist down, we are the cleanest people on the planet at the moment, and we've got to keep it up, unfortunately.
That's right, my man.
Michael Watson, Secretary of State, I always enjoy talking to you. And just keep us updated on what's going on. And if you need somebody to type in all caps for you during the next Zoom meeting with the Corps of Engineers, let me know, because I can type at 120 words a minute.
You got it. Look, stay safe, Mississippi, and just a quick hello to my good friends, Gracie Pierce and Annie and Cora Beth.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.